Hi, my name is Sam Russell. I'm a guitar teacher based in West London, and last year I wrote a book called How to Teach Guitar. As you can see, it's a pretty meaty book. It's just over 400 pages long, and it's everything you could possibly want to know about becoming a private guitar teacher and getting students and teaching them. And I thought I'd give you a quick overview of the chapters in the book and how it works. So the book's broken down into 4 sections, and I thought I'd do it roughly in the way that you would have to go through learning to be a guitar teacher. So you go through each section one at a time. First section is on finding students and advertising. A lot of teachers getting started struggle with that. I know I certainly did when I started teaching. I think it took me about 3 years to get to a point where I had enough students to make an income off it. And now I know what I'm doing. I've rebuilt a new teaching business from scratch in about 3.5 months. So being able to do things the right way certainly saves you a lot of time. That first section goes through everything about how to find students, how to advertise, how to write ads, what type of ads you should make, some examples of adverts, including ones of mine that absolutely bombed in the past. Also things you might not have thought about that are quite important, like how do you talk to a student on the phone or a potential student? How do you set up an introductory lesson? What should you do in an introductory lesson? How do you set up payments? Things like that. Lots of little logistical details which aren't really very exciting, but when you get them right, it makes life a lot easier for you and also for your students. Next section goes into teaching people one-to-one. So how do you teach them? What sort of approaches can you use for problem solving? What are some examples of syllabuses you can use? How to teach songs effectively? How do students learn? So you can use that to help them learn. Then the next section is on teaching in a group setting, which can be quite useful. So if you want to make really big money teaching guitar, the trick to that is to teach people in groups. Then your hourly rate goes up by a factor of 3 or 4, quite nice, or more. But you also have to be able to teach people effectively so that they're getting value from the lessons. Then the final chapter is on changing your business model for groups. So how things work with groups for your business model will be slightly different to one-to-one lessons. So here's a quick overview of the chapters because people are sometimes interested in that. So chapter 1 is an introductory chapter. So I'll just open the book up there so I can actually read through it. So it goes through a couple of important topics. Are you good enough to teach guitar? Quite an important one to start off with. Is it okay to be paid to teach guitar? Sometimes people feel guilty about being paid to teach guitar, or they feel like it's something that should only be done for love and not for money, or things like that. Throw that idea out the window completely. There's a couple of pages on that. It's fine to be paid to teach guitar, and it's great. I've worked a lot of worse jobs, I can tell you that. Who are you to teach guitar? Sometimes people feel a bit insecure about it. People feel like they need permission, or I don't know, whatever. We talk about that. As long as you can play some songs to a good level and you can help people learn, you're a good person to teach. Next chapter is on business maths. A lot of guitar teachers or potential guitar teachers don't think this through, but it's quite important. How do you measure an income? How many ways can a business make money? What are the important keys to making money as a guitar teacher? I'll give you a quick hint for that one. It's being able to find students and keep them for a long time. If you can keep your students for a long time, then it makes your life a lot easier than if every 3 weeks you need to find a brand new set of students. Next chapter is why do students want lessons and what are the type of students you're likely to get? So guitar teachers often don't get the motivation for student taking lessons quite right. So that chapter is broken down into a couple of sections. Why do students want lessons? Why will students choose you as a teacher? What factors go into a student deciding to choose you as a teacher? Important to know if you're going to write an advert. What types of students you're likely to see? So I can't cover every possible eventuality there, but I break down what I saw as a teacher teaching a couple of hundred people into a couple of categories. So it's quite useful for targeting your advertising. So what type of students do you get? What do students want to learn? What do students need to learn? Sometimes slightly different to what they want to learn. And what do students want to learn but they don't tell you, or maybe don't realise themselves? And what perception do students have of lessons? Important things to know. Next chapter is on copywriting. So what is copywriting? How does it work? What are some fundamentals for it? How do you write an advert? How do you structure an advert? Why do a lot of guitar teacher adverts not work very well, or as well as they could? And a couple of important things like, should you mention price in the advert? Some people say yes, some people say no. I'll tell you what I did and why. And then a couple of book recommendations as well if you want to do some more studying on writing adverts. Then we have a section on branding. So what is branding? What sort of image do you want to project? How do you name your business? And some visual tips on making sure that you look professional and you don't look silly. Okay, next chapter is paid advertising maths. A lot of guitar teachers don't do paid advertising because they don't quite realise how the numbers work. So if you make more than you spend, you're doing great. So this goes through, firstly, the maths behind paid advertising. What happens when everyone has seen your advert? Something called creative fatigue. I remember when I was advertising quite heavily, I was talking to my grandfather one day, and he said, oh, well, if you've put out hundreds of thousands of flyers, what happens after everyone's seen them? And he thought that I had to put my flyers out once and that'd be it. I'd never have to put them out again. Well, it doesn't quite work like that. It sort of does. Some people would hold on to flyers for years, literally years before getting into contact for lessons. But people move in and out of the area. Sometimes people need to see things 2 or 3 times before arriving to a decision. There's all sorts of reasons why it's worth continuously advertising rather than just doing it once. And how much should you spend on ads? Quite an important topic. If you spend too much, you're going to lose all your money. Don't spend enough, you won't see any results. So you've got to get that right. And most importantly, how do you measure that? So if you give up on your ads too early, then you'll waste your money. And if you keep a bad ad going too long, well, you'll also waste your money. So being able to measure your results, knowing what to measure and how to measure it is quite important. And also, I give you some context and examples for numbers as well. But this section basically boils down to how much are you willing to spend to get a student. And when you know that number and you're happy to spend it, you can get quite a lot with some good ads. I'll talk about a few different types of advertising next in quite a lot of detail. So flyers, organic advertising, making websites, Facebook ads, how those work. And then I give some examples of advertising fails. So a few examples of things where I spent several $100s, maybe even a couple of thousand actually over the years, that just completely flopped. So what went wrong for me and why it went wrong. Next section is on payments, booking and scheduling. So like I mentioned at the start, this is a lot of the logistical stuff you need to deal with. If you've got a whole bunch of students coming every week, how are they going to book in for lessons? How do you take time off? How do you do a lesson policy? How do most guitar teachers organise payments, for example? Most of them make a quite big mistake here, and it can cost you anywhere from 25 to 30% of your income quite quickly. Getting that right makes life a lot easier for you, for your students, and also keeps your income a lot more stable. Location. So what do you do if you can't teach from home? Should you teach from home? What are the maths on renting a place to teach from? And is there a better location nearby? So a section there on location. I recommend most people start teaching from home if you can, but if that's not possible at all, then there's all sorts of ideas in there. Things you probably may not have considered, but you can probably find somewhere. Next section is on booking the introductory lesson. So it starts off with a quick overview of what it is we're trying to achieve. What do you do when you get somebody on the phone? So to go back a step here, this is assuming that someone's got in contact with you about lessons, so they've seen your ads, they've replied to them. So what do we do next? What do you do before the phone call? What do you do on the phone call? What do you do if? Sometimes you get a few curveballs on the phone call when you're talking to a prospective student. So I go through a few weird situations I came across there and how you should react, or, well, you don't have to do it, but how I'd recommend it, and some of the mistakes I made there as well. This book has a lot of mistakes that I made, saves you making them. What do you do after the phone call? And also introductory lesson phone calls. It is a bit tricky to get started with. A lot of people get quite nervous about them, but like anything else, you just got to practice a little bit So I go through some tips on how you can practice it, and you get better at it before you know it. Okay, next section, chapter 15 out of something or other. There's quite a few chapters. Wow, 36. The introductory lesson, so we go through setting your prices, make it easy as possible for people to find you. Oh, that's a funny one actually. I had a problem where people would get lost on the way to meet me for the introductory lesson. I had a teacher room that's a bit of a hard to find location, and it was getting a bit annoying because people couldn't find me. I'd have to go find them and take them to the room afterwards. So rather than getting annoyed at them, I made a little map for people that helped quite a lot and made it a lot easier for people to find me. How do you handle the introductory lesson? How do you handle people's credit card information? You'll occasionally get people who you probably don't want taking lessons coming into one of your introductory lessons. So what do you do in those situations? What do you do with introductory lessons with children? Always make sure the parent is there as a good one there. But you're going to run them slightly differently to an introductory lesson with an adult. Next section, principles of teaching. Now that you've got some students coming in, you've got to know how to teach them. So I just need to check I don't have to go do some teaching. Oh, I've got a few minutes. So I'm making this video in between some of my lessons today. So principles of teaching. What is learning? Next chapter on how we learn. Then we've got a chapter on concept formation. There's a whole science called epistemology, which is about how human beings learn. So I go through some ideas from that. How the brain and body learn. So something we're doing as teaching people guitar is we're helping them develop a skill. So I go through how muscle memory develops and how the body learns. So anything from learning scales to chord shapes is going to be relevant there. Next chapter, planning lessons. How do you decide what to teach? How do you build rapport with a student, review previous lesson material, present new material, and also training. So one of the things that you should be doing with the students is not just presenting new stuff, but training them on the stuff that you're giving them. How do you create a worksheet that looks nice and professional and is helpful? So all good stuff in there. Next section is then we've got a few sections on specific topics. So teaching beginners. What can you teach for the first 5 lessons for a beginner? That's a whole chapter there breaking down how you can teach a beginner. Teaching music theory for beginners, teaching improvisation, teaching rhythm, using a metronome. And all of those sections come with things that students will probably struggle with, or things that you should address so that your student doesn't have to struggle with them in the first place. Then there's a chapter on teaching songs, so how to break down a song, how to teach a song, how to demonstrate it properly, get your student playing along to it. These are all just tips and tricks I've learned for helping your students learn as effectively and as quickly as possible. They're still going to have to do some work, but let's make it as easy as possible for them to learn. Next up, principles of group teaching. Now this is moving on to the chapter talking about teaching in groups rather than teaching one-to-one. So very big, very different dynamic. I would recommend that if you're new to teaching, you teach for, at least 6 to 9 months, one-to-one lessons, get a really good feel for that before moving to groups, if teaching groups is what you want to do. So principles of group teaching, this is a good one. 1, don't make your students feel like a loser. So quite an important chapter, a topic to cover. How many students should you put in a group? And there's all sorts of little tips there for how to make it work effectively and what do you do. So next chapter, repertoire, training and skills, music theory, group improvisation classes, teaching beginners. Those are all topics covered in different chapters across group teaching. Getting towards the end of the book now, the group teaching business model. So here we talk about the schedule, what kind of lesson plans you can offer, how you can make them very flexible. That's quite a nice benefit for the students, the flexibility you can offer with group lessons. How to move your students from one-to-one lessons to groups. What do you say to them? How do you run your scheduling? What do you do with your lesson agreement? And also some alternative teaching models you might find useful. When I say teaching model, that just means how you're organising your teaching. So are you teaching people one-to-one is a teaching model, teaching people in groups is a teaching model, and there's a couple of things you can do in between. Getting towards the end of the book now. There's quite a lot in this book. Talk about making sheets, so different programs you can use, Guitar Pro, Neck Diagrams, word processors, Logic Pro, printing your sheets off. Having a nice quality sheet It takes a bit of time to set up, but once it's done, you just hit print and you're good to go. And still got a few minutes before I need to teach. I think I can wrap this up quickly. Workshops and masterclasses, quite a fun thing you can do for your students. And then finally at the end, there's a little bit talking about how you need to handle taxes and expenses and accountants and things like that. Disclaimer, I'm not an accountant. This is not professional financial advice. This is just my experience and things you definitely need to check for yourself. And then finally, some recommended reading at the end. So there's quite a few good books on studies into how musicians learn, and I recommend some of those. So slightly out of breath after running through that. It's quite a long book. It's got pretty much everything you could want to know about teaching guitar, 439 pages. Wow. Yeah. So if you're looking to get started teaching guitar, there's quite a lot you can go through there. It'll answer a lot of questions, and I think you'll find it quite useful.